Hey guys, Mark with the Dog Trainer here. Today we're going to do a quick video on the best bed for a golden retriever. My friend's dog Sammy happened to be here, so we figured this would be the perfect model for our video today. So you guys can thank him for his participation. Now, if I'm working with a client with a golden retriever, 99% of the time, I'm going to be recommending the Amazon Basics elevated cooling bed. And that's what I've got set up for you guys here. They have 5 different sizes depending on what size your dog is. But today we've got the large one set up that's for dogs up to 90 pounds. And we've got the extra large one set up that is for dogs up to 110 pounds. And I'll put the links in the description to all 5 sizes so that way you guys can check those out. Now, let's get into why I prefer these particular beds for golden retrievers. Okay, so the first thing is that they're just really inexpensive beds. So they're not necessarily the fanciest beds. They're not the fancy bougie furniture type beds. They're pretty basic. But for how inexpensive they are, I really think they bring a lot of value. They're really a great bed for how cheap they are. So that's the first thing, is that they're just very inexpensive. Now, the second thing is probably the biggest appeal for a golden retriever or any dog with like really thick fur is that there's a cooling aspect to it. Okay, so these beds, because the fabric is very, very breathable and it's elevated off the ground, there's a constant source of like cold air coming off the ground underneath them. Okay, I've even seen some clients take this bed and just put it over an air conditioning vent. So that way there's like a deliberate cold air that is coming up and underneath. So now let's say that, our dog is hot a lot of the times, but they still like all that cushion. Well, then we can kind of have the best of both worlds. That sometimes what I'll do is, this is actually why I have the really big one, is that I'll throw like a bunch of blankets on one half of it. So if they're laying on their bed and they want all that cushion, they'll kind of bunch up the blankets and use it that way. But if they get too hot, they kind of push them to the side and use the more ventilated side. So it's kind of nice that you can get the best of both worlds with this type of bed. Now, that kind of leads me into the next topic, which is like cleaning and maintenance. Okay, where like what I usually do is once a week, I just take those blankets, throw them in the wash, and then I'll spray the bed down with like disinfectant and wipe it down. And it's like a very, very easy way to clean the bed. Now, if we're talking about like a foam bed or a fabric bed, if our dog happens to have an accident or get sick on it or something like that, it's very difficult to restore the foam back to its original state. And on top of that, a lot of those fabric beds, the more frequently you're putting them in the wash, you're just shortening the lifespan. Where that's why over time I have gravitated more towards these types of beds because, blankets you could wash over and over again and they're just going to last a really long time. Now, again, obviously golden retrievers shed a lot, at least everyone I've ever met. So these elevated beds, like Roombas can go underneath them without a problem, or a vacuum attachment that we can go underneath. And a lot of times, Goldens and dogs that like digging in the mud and, swimming and all that kind of stuff, these beds, a lot of the dirt and stuff kind of falls through them to the floor, and it can be kind of a little easier to just kind of pick it up and sweep it out. As opposed to, again, like a fabric type bed where all that dirt and stuff just kind of gets stuck in the fabric. Okay, so that's the next thing, is really just how easy these things are to clean. Now, the last real appeal to these is just going to be how they're used for training. That a big portion of my dog training is teaching dogs what we call the spot command, or like a place command, which basically just means lay down and stay on your bed. I've already talked about a few aspects of how this is connected to training that it would help, with like potty training a puppy and having to clean up after accidents. And again, if dogs are going to be on here for a long period of time, we need to make sure that they're comfortable and they're not overheating. But now other aspects of training that these beds can kind of be nice for is, I'm not going to say that they're 100% chew proof, but they're a lot more chew proof than any type of fabric or foam bed. Where a lot of times those types of beds, I think, puppies, they're just kind of bored and they're teething. So they start to kind of rip open the casing and they start pulling out the filling. And there's like a fixation to that they just really enjoy that. So like once they open up that first hole and pull out some stuffing, that's really like the beginning of the end of that bed. It's kind of like the doorway has been opened. Where these beds, there's no foam for them to pull out. So I think that one, they tend not to chew on these beds as much because there's just less gratification in it. And then two, the way that these beds are designed, there's not really a lot of areas for them to get their teeth stuck in there to start destroying it. So I'm sure, like, with consistency, they could probably start to pull some of the threads and kind of slowly, break it down a little bit. So down the road, I'll do a video that's a little bit more geared for like heavy chewers or really destructive dogs. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that these beds are at least going to be a lot better than a fabric or foam type bed for chewing and the ability to be chew proof. Now, the last thing that we'll talk about as far as training is concerned is, again, the spot command or the place command. Is that a lot of puppies specifically, and maybe some dogs that are just struggling with the concept, something about the bed being elevated, like because they have to step off of it in order to kind of break the command. I think that the elevated beds can help some puppies and dogs connect the dots of staying on the boundary a little bit faster. Now, again, I don't think you necessarily need one of these beds to do a spot or place command, but there definitely have been some instances that I've seen it's helpful. So those are really all the main things that I think make these beds so great for, golden retrievers. So why don't we take apart one of these beds so I can show you what that looks like and kind of put it back together to show you what the assembly is like. And then we'll probably wrap up the video from there. Okay, guys, so this is for the most part what it looks like when everything is taken apart. If you lay everything out when you get it out of the box. Now, the only thing I didn't do is I just left this piece in just because it's a little redundant and I don't want this video to be longer than what it needs to be. But I just left this side in because we're going to be showing you what it looks like when we put that one together. Okay, now in the box, it's going to come with a tool that you can use to put this thing together so you don't need to go out and buy anything. Now, the first step is going to be putting all the different poles in. Okay, so the longest poles are going to be in the front and back. Okay, and then the shorter poles are going to be more lengthwise. And once you kind of get that pushed in, then we're going to be putting these in. Now, the one thing you have to be careful of with this is that you'll see one side has a little bit of like an indent in it. Okay, I'll bring it a little closer so you can see. Okay, this little indented piece should be facing out. Okay, so when you put it in, just make sure that the indented side is facing away from the bed. Okay, and then there's also a little bit of like an arc on this horizontal pole that will line up with the shape of the inside of this piece. Okay. And I'm going to start by just using my fingers, and I'll probably tighten everything once I get the whole bed kind of put together. Again, making sure that the little indented piece is facing out. I think the first few times I put this together, I did it backwards and had to redo the whole thing. Okay. All right, and then like I said at the beginning of the video, the other side I just left put together. So that is going to be a little bit faster for me to show you how to put this thing together. And pretty much all the different sizes have the same, very, very similar assembly. The biggest bed, this extra large one, does have one extra component to it that the other ones do not have. Okay, and I'll show you guys that here in a second. Okay, so now that I've got the bulk of it put together, now I'm going to go through and tighten these with the wrench. Because the first time I did it, I was trying to tighten them all like one at a time as I was putting it together, and it just kind of throws things out of whack a little bit. So that's why I recommend only kind of half screwing them first until everything's put together, and then go through and tighten everything. And something I did not point out earlier in the video is that you can actually get a green version of this. So for whatever reason you prefer that, you can definitely do that. These light gray kind of gets stained a little bit from the Georgia red clay. So the green might have worked a little better if I was worried about that, but I don't really care about that kind of stuff. Now, if this were any of the smaller models, that would pretty much be it. But the extra large model comes with this extra piece here. Okay, that's just an extra, like an added support. Okay, so basically we just put these on. This is going to go underneath in the middle. This part can be a little bit tricky. Actually, so we're going to lock this in on one side. Then we're going to lock it in on this side. And that is pretty much everything you need to know about the elevated or the Amazon Basic elevated cooling dog bed. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.